We are really thrilled to welcome all of you here this evening to celebrate Srimad Bhagavatam. We are very fortunate that we share Srimad Bhagavatam amongst us. I can say personally, I started reading it over 50 years ago, and I still read it regularly and find great nourishment and enrichment there. It's actually transporting. Srimad Bhagavatam is transporting. Through Prabhupada's words and the verses, we're taken out of this world and brought to the spiritual world together. There's so much there to relish and to meditate on and to realize. So we are indeed fortunate souls to be under the shelter of Srimad Bhagavatam. And we welcome you here at Bhaktivedanta Manor regularly so we can relish Srimad Bhagavatam together. Not only the philosophy, but also the practical application. Thank you so much for coming. We're delighted to have you. Please come again and again. Hare Krishna.
Mother Vishaka, thank you so much. Such a wonderful way to open today's program, hearing about Mother Vishaka reading for 50 years, the Srimad Bhagavatam. I only wish I can get to half of that. So a bit of overview of today's program. We have some inspiring videos coming up. We have an engaging panel discussion. We have an energizing presentations and more blissful kirtan than the kirtan we already had at the start. So however you came across Srimad Bhagavatam, it's likely that you met a Go Matsya team member who maybe introduced you to the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Go Matsya project is a global effort to save and preserve this Vedic culture through mass distribution and education. There are three parts to this global project. One is to preserve the Vedic culture. It's to be able to keep it through generation to generation and pass it down to the kids that we see here today. Second one is to distribute this knowledge to every town and village in this world. And there's no exaggeration there. Every town and village. Can we say that together? Every town and village. And the third one is to educate through spiritual solutions. We're so very well aware of all the material problems going on in the world right now. And only through spiritual solutions can we find peace. So on behalf of the Go Matsya team, I'd like to add our welcome to all the special souls present today. We keep calling this the Special Souls event. So why is this a Special Souls event? In Sanskrit, there is a word, kritagya. Kritagya means grateful. One of Lord Krishna's qualities is that he is grateful. He becomes very grateful when one chants his holy names or shows an interest in wanting to know, to hear about him. And also, he becomes very grateful when we align ourselves to his mission. So by taking Srimad Bhagavatam, you have indicated to Lord Krishna a level of seriousness that you want to understand and you want to know more about the Lord. And the Lord becomes grateful. And by taking Srimad Bhagavatam, you've become part of the mission to preserve this great literature and make it accessible. Lord Krishna is very grateful for that. So therefore, when Krishna is grateful, he reciprocates. He reciprocates with all you special souls. That's why everyone here is a special soul. So we're very pleased to invite you and have your association for this program. In the pastimes of Lord Krishna, when Krishna kills the bull demon, does anyone remember the bull demon's name, kids? Aristasura. Fantastic. He has been reading Canto 10 of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimati Radharani demands that Krishna must take a bath in all the 7 holy rivers. Krishna stamps his heel and all the 7 holy rivers appear then and there, forming Shamakund, a sacred place for purification. How do we purify ourselves here in the UK? In the Skand Puran, we find a conversation between Lord Vishnu and Lord Brahma, where it is written, O son, all the holy rivers, kundas and lakes, all sacrifices the 7 sacred cities, namely Ayodhya, Mathura, Haridwar, Kashi, Kanchi, Ujjain, and Dwarka, and all the holy mountains are present where Srimad Bhagavatam is discussed. So let us discuss and glorify Srimad Bhagavatam today in the association of all the devotees, and let us go home back to Krishna. I'd now like to introduce for our panel session, Mr. Vaisesika Maharaj. I recently read an article asking famous people what happens after death. And they said, nothing, or I'll find out when I get there. Vaisesika Maharaj was asking questions about death to his parents when he was just a young boy. At 16, his friend left a copy of the Back to Godhead magazine at his door, and through rapt captivation, Maharaj decided to become a monk at the age of 16. In 1986, Maharaj got married to Mother Nirkula, and they've inspired thousands of souls around the world in their spiritual practices, sharing the teachings of their Guru, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta, Swami Srila Prabhupada. A big round of applause for Vaisesika Maharaj, please. Very honored to be able to introduce Keshava Maharaj. In this life, Maharaj grew up in an affluent Indian family in Wembley, where the discussions and ambitions were predominantly about accumulation and acquiring possessions. Whereas Maharaj was into simplicity and minimalism. Maharaj began asking questions at 16 and came across the Bhagavad Gita, which completely flipped on its head the understanding of what spirituality is. Maharaj studied at UCL and after graduating, chose to disconnect and go to India at the age of 21 for 6 months. This was transformational for Maharaj, and he has been selflessly serving as a monk ever since, pioneering many global projects, authoring 10 books, and last year took vows of lifelong renunciation, leading him to be a non-stop globetrotter. Big round of applause for Keshava Maharaj, please.
Hare Krishna. Okay, I think you can do a little louder than that. Give us a loud Hare Krishna. That was about 3. I think you can still do a little louder than that. Hare Krishna. Wonderful, wonderful. It's so nice to be with all of you this evening. Are you happy to be here? Yes, we're going to have a wonderful evening. We're really going this evening, just absorb our hearts and minds in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is as brilliant as the sun. It's not often the sun is shining in the UK. So we feel the heat, we feel the positivity, isn't it, when the sun's out. And the Srimad Bhagavatam is really that sun which has arisen in Kali Yuga to give us light. Put your hands up if you have a set of Srimad Bhagavatam. Don't worry, I'm not going to sell you one at this point. That's coming later. But just put your hands really high if you've got a set of Srimad Bhagavatam at home. Okay, put them down. Now put your hand up if the books are actually out of the box and on a shelf. Okay, a few less there. And put your hands up if every single volume of the Bhagavatams on your shelves have the plastic taken off. Okay, a few less there. You've got to take the plastic off. I grew up in a Gujarati family. And all of you know, give me a nod if when you grew up, your remote control was in plastic. Just give us a nod. Yeah? Give me a nod if when you grew up, your sofas were in plastic. So we have this culture when we grew up that everything was in plastic because our parents didn't want anything to be stained or broken. So I have to sometimes remind them that you're allowed to take the plastic off the Bhagavatam. So it's really a great opportunity. Here we are with the Srimad Bhagavatam. And today we're going to meditate a little bit on this great fortune that we've received to be in contact. We have His Grace Vaisesika Prabhu. We're so fortunate, and we're going to kind of probe him and pick his brains and go a little bit into his heart. Would you like to go a little bit into his heart and find some jewels there? We're going to try and draw them out. So I need your help. Will you help me? Yes, I'm going to kind of launch some inquiries, and then I'm going to open it up to all of you to see what might be in your hearts and minds. But I think we can begin by just maybe offering some prayers as we invoke auspiciousness and really try to open our hearts and minds to receive the grace of Srimad Bhagavatam this evening. Om Ajnanatirmirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Srila Prabhupada Ki. When we lived in the Brahmacharya ashram, then at one point we removed all the beds from all the rooms, and at night you would just sleep wherever you found a floor space. I was always fascinated by the library in the Brahmacharya ashram, and I used to look at the Bhagavatams on the shelf. And I decided what I'd do is every night I would sleep right by the bookshelf with my head next to the Bhagavatam. Because I had this notion that if I would stay there, then during the night, all the knowledge would magically go into my head. But I often used to look at the Bhagavatams, and we look at the Bhagavatams here. And it's just for a moment, I want you to consider that these are words which have been passed down since time immemorial. Just think about that for a second. These are the words that were scribed by Vyasadeva in the caves of the Himalayas. These are the words and the mature realizations of the most evolved personalities in creation. And those words, that literature is right here before us today. And could you begin, Vaisesika Prabhu, by telling us a little bit about that journey? How does this knowledge, which directly emanates from the lips of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that was penned by Vyasadeva, the literary incarnation of Krishna, how do those words reach us here today? And what can we learn from that journey of the Bhagavatam to 2024 here in London?
Thank you, Maharaj, for such an inspiring question. And thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. It's an honor to be with you for such a cause. It reminds me of the gathering that's mentioned at the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam at Naimisharanya, which incidentally means the place where nobody blinks, because they're so eager to hear. And thank you for your eagerness to come here, because there's so many other places you could be, but you're giving your attention. The Srimad Bhagavatam gives us a history of how Krishna first spoke Bhagavatam. Although it's an eternal literature, it's represented the beginning of each creation. In the Vedic wisdom, creation is cyclical, and it's based on the breathing of Mahavishnu, who exhales and the world comes forth, and he inhales, and it's wound back up into his transcendental body. And the entire purpose of the creation is to give everyone an opportunity who's been covered by material energy and has forgotten their real purpose in life to come back to the spiritual world. In the very beginning of the creation, Krishna speaks to the first created being, Brahma, who's born from the lotus stem from Garbhodakshai Vishnu. And as has been presented by the great acharyas or teachers of the Bhagavatam, they point to 4 verses that they call the Chaturshloki Bhagavatam. And these are in code, and they're meant to be expanded, and they have been expanded over millennia. There's also the endeavor of Vyasadeva himself, who received the teachings of the Bhagavatam as a student. Krishna to Brahma, then to his son Narada, then to Vyasa. And if we follow it all the way down, there's a teacher-disciple relationship learning the Bhagavatam. And a very important part of the Bhagavatam is in the 5th chapter of the 1st canto, when there's a discussion between Narada Muni, who's the spiritual master of Srila Vyasadeva, and Vyasadeva, who's a literary incarnation of God. That's how he's known. He's an avatar, one who comes down to give assistance to those in darkness and bring them back up again. He feels anxiety. And what's revealed in the 5th chapter is that he feels anxious because although he's presented so much by bringing forth the Vedas and having it divided into 4 parts so that it could be widely disseminated, and then bringing forth the itihasas like the Mahabharata and the Puranas, which are more digestible by people in the modern age. The Vedas require, starting when you're a child, to learn the Vedic accents and to live in pristine conditions like a Gurukula. The Puranas explain what all the Vedas mean and what their ultimate purpose is. So when Srila Vyasadeva was in anxiety, it was a ripe time for his guru to come. And he put it before his guru, Narada, and said, "Why am I feeling despondent?" And Narada told Vyasadeva, "Because you haven't given complete enough knowledge of the spiritual world." There's a way in which Vyasadeva wanted to appeal to the masses, especially if you look at Mahabharata. It's a real page-turner, isn't it? In fact, when the Mahabharata plays on television in India, the whole country shuts down. At least it used to, so they could watch it. But he said, it's not enough. You have to tell more. We need more, he said. The people of the world need to hear what is going on in the spiritual world and who's the source of everything and how are there loving relationships in the spiritual world. So Narada gives Vyasadeva the instruction that go back to your ashrama, which is at Samyaprash, surrounded by berry trees. He's known as Badarayana because there's a certain kind of berry that is named in that way. And it's known that sages would live on berries. And it's also known that at Samyaprash, the home or little cottage or kutir of Vyasadeva, there's no modes of nature. He sat down there in complete meditation in samadhi, and there the complete form of the Srimad Bhagavatam was revealed to him in samadhi. So when he came out of his meditation, he wrote all that and presented it, also known as Samadhi Bhashya. What do you say when you come out of seeing the spiritual world? He completed what was known as the Bhagavat Purana, and it became the complete work called the Srimad Bhagavatam. And just one footnote to that is that although it started with 4 verses and became expanded, well, that's a passive way of saying that Vyasadeva expanded it. It's noted in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada's purports, that there are longer versions of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is 12 cantos. There's some with hundreds or thousands. So today you're getting off easy with the smaller version. Later we'll see about getting you the version with thousands of cantos. Well, you might have to get a bigger house, though.
Wonderful, wonderful. So what Narada Muni instructed Vyasadeva in was to basically bring out the essence. And so what we're really reading here is the essence, the There's a beautiful verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Sarva Vedanta Saram Hi Srimad Bhagavatam Ishyate, that if you want to understand what is the sar, the very essence of all the of all the Vedas, then it's found in the Bhagavatam. And it really kind of came from Vyasadev's despondency. I'm just going to pick up on that and just talk about how Vyasadeva felt some despondency because he had written so much, but he didn't feel satisfied in his heart. And I think some people have the despondency that they read the Bhagavatam and they feel like they're not really understanding it or appreciating it. Or they're reading these pages and it's not really registering or moving them in any way. And their despondency sometimes comes from that. Can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with the Bhagavatam and whether it was an instant love at first sight? Or is it something that you developed over time to appreciate the Bhagavatam as much as you do?
Yeah, I definitely have a story about that. And I remember it vividly because as I was growing up, I was eager to know what the purpose of life was, why I had to die, and so forth. And when I came in contact with the Bhagavad Gita, it was the perfect book for me at the perfect level. And I read it over and over and over again before I was able to meet the devotees and move into the ashram. And when I did move in, I saw that there were other books, the Srimad Bhagavatam being one of them. And when I started looking through those, it didn't make as much sense to me as the Bhagavad Gita, because the Bhagavad Gita, although there's a preamble, a story, it's a battlefield, Krishna gets right into it in the second chapter. The books that I saw, and I think when I joined in 1973, there were only a couple of cantos out, maybe up to third canto. And I'd look through and look at the pictures, and I'd see there's stories. I didn't know how they all fit together, and I really wasn't sure I couldn't relate to the Bhagavatam. The way I related to the Bhagavad Gita, the tight philosophy, the progression, and the way that Krishna presented everything just made such perfect sense to me and resonated with me. And then, after joining the ashram, every day we would have a Srimad Bhagavatam class. Our temple in San Francisco was beautiful. Inside, it was all white. It had a skylight where the morning light would come in when we were having Srimad Bhagavatam class. And I remember the contrast of the all-white environment. See, it actually used to be a funeral home. And there were the beautiful pictures, art presentations of the spiritual world, and then there were flowers, flower petals inevitably strewn on the floor. And that contrast was so aesthetically pleasing. And then everyone would sit down. The environment was entirely new to me because I just followed along. And there would be, every day, a Srimad Bhagavatam class. And at first I would just sit and listen with all the other devotees and try to understand what was being said and what was being read from the Srimad Bhagavatam. And I remember one day when we were reading in the class about Krishna in Dwarka. It was in the first canto. And it talked about his relationship with the queens of Dwarka. And there was a phrase there that the temple president was reading when he was giving the class. And he said that the queens could not quit those lotus feet of Lord Krishna. I don't know why that resonated with me, but somehow it caught in my ear and I couldn't get it out. I started with they couldn't quit his lotus feet. And it brought to my mind, Krishna's a person, and there's a loving entourage around Krishna, and he has queens, and there are devotees. And my conclusion of how I woke up to the beauty of Bhagavatam and then became interested in it was that as said in the Bhagavatam, satam prasangam mamabir yasambido bhavanti hrit karna rasayana kata. Srimad Bhagavatam is best read in the company of pure devotees. And the verse I just quoted from Lord Kapila Dev says that when you're in that association of satam, that is, devotees who have no other objective in life except to serve Lord Krishna, then something magical happens. And poetically, the verse says that when the devotees who have that loving feeling for Krishna read the Srimad Bhagavatam, and then it enters into your ear, it acts like medicine. Normally medicine you take in your mouth, but this medicine you take through the ear, and then it enters the heart. And then everything changes from the inside out. And I felt that happen for me. I didn't have any expectation because I didn't even know what the Srimad Bhagavatam was. But I just followed and sat with the devotees, and the transformation from not knowing or understanding the Bhagavatam to it becoming more and more attractive to me occurred in that association. So one of the lessons is be in the association of those who know and love the Bhagavatam and just hear. The magic happens the same way when you take medicine. You may not know what's in it. But if you know you got it from a reputable source, doctor had a diploma on the wall and told you, it'll be 8 days before you'll feel anything, the change will take place.
Yeah, this is such a beautiful point. Is explained Krishna Tulya Bhagavata, that Krishna is the Bhagavatam. And just as we're developing a relationship with Krishna, we develop a relationship with these books. And relationships take time. Relationships take energy. Relationships mean sometimes we're with the object or the person we're trying to relate to, and we don't always feel connected, but it develops over time. And relationships mean that the Bhagavatam also speaks to you. Have any of you had a experience where you felt like you've opened Srila Prabhupada's books and it's just been speaking directly to you in your situation right now? Have you ever had that experience? Could you share with us, Vaisesika Prabhu, something that happened to you? I want to say a mystical or a magical or a memorable or a moving experience you had with the books. Maybe something that was on your mind, something that you were going through, where you really felt strongly that the Bhagavatam was speaking to you.
I can say in a very practical way. Well, first I'll preface it by saying that there's something that's impossible to achieve in this world, and that's to feel all right. And what I started to notice by reading the books every day is I started to feel all right. When I'd finish reading, I'd think, everything's going to be all right. I feel all right now. And when I don't read the books, then I have a sense of impending doom or worry about what might happen or how I'm going to solve the plethora of problems that I have to deal with in that day. So it's become a kind of food for me, not even a supplement. It's the mainstay. And I also feel that it's given me a different vision of the world. Prabhupada mentioned when I first joined the temple, I heard him say that we should see through the eyes of the scripture. And one of my favorite verses in the Bhagavatam, Bhakti Parishanubhava Viraktir Anyata Trisha Eka Kala Prapadyamanasya Yatashnash Tushti Pushti Shuddha Payonugasam, compares reading the Bhagavatam or doing devotional service to eating. It's so commonsensical and understandable. We know when we're hungry. Do you know when you're hungry? I always wonder, how do I know? People say, are you hungry? Yeah. How did I know that? And I also know when I'm full. Somebody gives me enough and I've had my last chapati and I say, I don't want any more. So the verse says when you eat food, You get nourishment, satisfaction, and your hunger goes away. And in a similar way, when you read Bhagavatam or perform any kind of devotional service, but especially hearing, there's a natural way in which the sense of devotion for Krishna awakens in your heart, and you start seeing everything in relationship to Krishna. And then finally, there's a kind of detachment. Just like when you're done eating, you were really hungry, you wanted more, and then all of a sudden you say, I don't want any more. And this is a sense that this is the other thing that's impossible to achieve in this world, is to give up bad habits. You might give one up and then realize you developed another one, right? And they just stick to you every which way, like little stickers or some mango sap. You can't get it out of your hair. Don't get mango sap in your hair. Not that you were going to try. But it's hard to get rid of. But that verse says, if you hear Bhagavatam, there's a natural way in which you just don't want it anymore. It meaning you don't want the bad habit. You're not interested in low vibrations or being with low-minded people. You actually get a taste. So I find this is an ongoing miracle because the world is so overwhelming. Every day is a new challenge just for us to survive. I don't even know how the body holds together. There's all these organs working. Any one of them can go the wrong direction. We don't even know what's going to happen. But the Bhagavatam makes me feel that I'm all right, and I also feel naturally satisfied. In fact, just on that point, I spend a little time every year in India reading Bhagavatam exclusively. And I remember one day when I was there at our Bhagavatam reading retreat, and I walked through a room to talk to one of my godbrothers, and he had an assistant living next to him. And the assistant was sleeping on a little mat on the floor. He wasn't there at the time, but there was just a thin mat on the floor. That's where he stayed. Tiny little bag where he kept his personal stuff, and then a full set of Bhagavatams. And when I walked through there, I thought, yeah, that's enough. That's all you'd really need to be happy. Because I had felt it so many times reading Bhagavatam, and then you look out and see the world, it's like, yeah, I'm satisfied right here. So that's the miracle for me of Bhagavatam, that it never fails. And it's a necessity for me to take that time every day to read Bhagavatam and hear something, and it never disappoints.
Yeah, and never disappoints. And you said it really makes you feel all right. It makes you feel positive, hopeful, helps you overcome your fears, your inhibitions. Could you tell us something that you've read from the Bhagavatam that then made you go out into the world and live differently, interact differently, act differently? Something from the Bhagavatam which really changed your vision and made you just look at life in a different way and function in a different way.
One of the verses that I heard I had read it before, but it was another circumstance where I heard a devotee who was deeply attached to the Bhagavatam and was giving a talk. And it was from the 3rd canto, and it was a conversation between Vidura and Uddhava. And when Vidura starts asking questions to Uddhava, and he remembers something, he starts to think about the spiritual world, and he's remembering Krishna's pastimes and speaks of them in summary. But when he comes to one of the pastimes of Krishna, where Krishna was just a little baby, and Kamsa was sending demons to try to kill the baby because he was envious of God. And that demoness was Putana, and she came into the nursery, the place where Krishna was staying. They all welcomed her in because she made herself extremely attractive. And it's a village. People would come into the village. Mothers would come to see Krishna and pick him up. And they were disarmed by her beauty and the circumstance of the joy of Krishna being born recently. So she came in, and actually her intention was to kill Krishna. Well, instead Krishna killed her, and also, according to the verse in the Bhagavatam, liberated her. So the verse starts, Aho Bhakyam Stanakalakutam. And the speaker was talking about this and kept saying, Aho Bhakyam Stanakalakutam. And I said, who's Bhakya? You know, it's like, it turned out Putana was the sister of Bhakasura, another one of the demons in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam. But this goes to answering your question. It gave me just hearing that verse and the circumstance of it. I had heard it before, but it struck me in a certain way that gave me a much deeper appreciation for Vrindavan. I looked at Vrindavan a different way, and I was, from that verse, hearing that verse from a particular devotee at a particular time, something changed in me, and I became much more eager to go to Vrindavan and see the places where Krishna did his pastimes. And I still remember that verse and the circumstance. It's a loop that goes in my head often, or sometimes.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. We're going to give everyone an opportunity to also ask some questions. So just in a moment, I'm going to open it up. You talked about a loop, and I know that you do have this beautiful, what can I call it, exercise of learning chapters and learning verses. And the Sanskrit of the Bhagavatam is very, very powerful. You were mentioning about Vyasadeva and how he spoke in Samadhi Bhasya, the language of trance. Could you teach us a verse? We can all do it together. A short verse which you hold dear to your heart and which you'd like to share with us that we can all follow along.
I can, but you've been asking me all the questions. and the verses you generally pick out that I've been hearing lately are obviously ones that have gone in really deeply. And may I ask you first, which verse really resonates with you?
I fell into that one. I guess for me, there are different verses in the Bhagavatam which really attract me. I guess I took up a life of renunciation. And so there is a lot of hard-hitting verses in the Bhagavatam which reveal the reality, the harsh reality of this world, and those kind of tend to resonate with me a lot. There are other verses which really depict the beauty of the spiritual reality and Krishna's beauty, which are obviously very, very wonderful as well. But the verse, I think, one of the verses that I regularly recite from the Bhagavatam is a verse that Srila Prabhupada himself quoted many, many times. And he talks about what life is meant for. And he says, so all of you can repeat after me? Yes? Okay, you need to have good memory. It's... I'll do it line by line, and I think you'll be able to follow along. So it goes like this, and you can repeat after me, line by line. Kamasya nendriya pritir labho jiveta yavata jivesya tattva jigyasa nartho yascheha karmabhi. So this is basically talking about life's desires. Karma is a word which means our desires or what really resonates in our heart. And what this verse in the Bhagavatam is saying is that life's desires should never be aimed towards the temporary, towards the transitory, towards the ephemeral. So much of our desires, if we analyze them, we spend so much time, energy, resource, effort, endeavor, so much blood, sweat, and tears after things that just come and go. And this verse of the Bhagavatam tells us that life's desires are so powerful. Your desire is so powerful because it can manifest anything you want. But we tend to desire the wrong things. And so this verse tells us that life's desires should be aimed towards understanding who we are, understanding tattva. Tattva is a very beautiful word. It means truth, but it means that which stands true in every time, place, and circumstance and never changes no matter what's happening in the world. And so this verse of the Bhagavatam says when we direct our desires towards those eternal truths and the eternal identity and the eternal aspiration that lies deep within us, then it's the proper fulfillment of human life. So I always remember that verse because it reminds me to desire the right things. I think we can open it up, and perhaps there are some questions out here. This is your chance to kind of navigate a little deeper. Perhaps you have something about the Bhagavatam that you maybe would like to know more about. Perhaps there's something about reading the Bhagavatam that you'd like to uncover and how to develop your relationship with the Srimad Bhagavatam. Perhaps there's a character or a discussion or a philosophical question that you may want to ask. So would anyone like to ask a question and kind of break the ice a little bit? Yes, is that a question there?
Hare Krishna, thank you so much, both of you. I was wondering if you could share some tips how we can study Srimad Bhagavatam in a way that we can get the most out of it, so we can be absorbed and we can really relish it. How, if you could give some tips.
Everyone has a different lifestyle and a different taste for reading and hearing. So there's no one absolute way to read the Bhagavatam. Although, as I mentioned before, hearing in the association of devotees can be highly effective. For me, noticing how big the Bhagavatam is at one point and feeling a little intimidated. Have you ever felt about anything in your life that if I can't do it all, then I won't do any of it because it seems so overwhelming? And then one day, I started thinking about how would I be able to read the whole Bhagavatam completely all the way through. And then I heard a talk about how anything that seems overwhelming that you want to achieve, just divide it into small parts. Seems pretty obvious. But then it came into my mind while I was driving one day, aha, the Bhagavatam has a finite number of pages. Why don't I just count them and then figure out how many I'd have to read to finish the Bhagavatam in certain intervals? And a friend of mine helped me count not just the Bhagavatam, but all of the books that Prabhupada had written. And we came up with a little chart. And we called it Be a Sage, Page by Page. And what I've done that's really helped me is pick out the time frame that I want to read the whole Bhagavatam. And I was a little bit in a hurry, so I started with a regimen of reading it once a year all the way through. Because all I had to do was read 41 pages a day. But then you could also do 8 pages a day and finish it in 5 years. But for me, having that goal changed a lot because the main point is exposure. And if you have a goal and you try to achieve it every single day, then you'll find when you hear continuously, like the Bhagavatam says to do, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya means continuously, but it also means, according to our acharyas, at least once a day. And if you put yourself in that position where you can read a little bit every day and feel like you're making progress, then you'll be encouraged. And that you'll also find there are circumstances when it's your time to read and there'll be people there. And you'll say, would you like to read with me? Or you could even ask them, would you like to read out loud to me? And then we'll switch back and forth. And then another way of doing that is to find special times when you can take the time to sit and read for longer periods of time with others. Sometimes on festival days, or if you pick a time, as we do during Kartik, which is a whole month, we go off and try to sequester ourselves as far away from all the festivals and just have a continuous reading every day of the Bhagavatam. So the main thing is find a pace that you can handle. You can go really slow, and it doesn't matter how many pages necessarily. It's up to you. It has to be something more than 0 and not less than 1 to keep moving.
Yeah, and just to add to that, one technique that someone taught me, which I didn't think was that groundbreaking when they told me, but when I started doing it, it was actually amazing. And they said, just read all of the translations first. So you take a chapter, and what you do is you read all of the translations. It was really quick. And then what you do is you come back, and obviously the purport is where we're really getting Srila Prabhupada's association. But there's something powerful in the purport which comes out once you've contextually understood the story. And so now I know devotees who just read all the translations of the Bhagavatam like once or twice every year. So they've all read the translations of the Bhagavatam 10, 20, 30 times. So the story is totally in their head now. And then they say when you read the verse and the purport, it jumps out to you in a different way because of that contextual understanding. So you can also try that technique. I found it to be very rewarding. Yeah. Someone else, is there another question anyone would like to ask? Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Just connected to that question, something that you were mentioning, Prabhuji, was that when we read the Mahabharata, it's a page turner. You know, we can imagine ourselves as being the hero, our manager is the villain. We sort of, you know, can relate to the Mahabharata. And I was wondering, sometimes when we try to read the Bhagavatam, that flow isn't there. That sort of, it can be quite hard to relate to. You know, sometimes when it's going through the family lineages or creation or something. And I was wondering, how can one develop that taste where they can feel like, yeah, I want to get to the next page, I want to know more?
Sanatana Goswami says in one of his prayers in the Krishna Lila Stava about the Bhagavatam that every word is pouring down nectar to us. And I can appreciate what you're saying about certain sections may seem a little more technical, or there are lineages that go through. And the way I think about it is doing parikram at Govardhan Hill. This is one of the things we've done over the years, staying there. Has anybody been to Govardhan Hill? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1,000. So at Govardhan Hill, everyone walks around very joyfully. And when you go around Govardhan Hill, there are some places that are very smooth and easygoing. And then, at least in the past, there have been places that are very rough. What do you mean that the smooth part ended? You got to walk on the road now, or even worse, there's gravel from some construction. Generally, everyone walks in bare feet. And you're going to go around Govardhan Hill. Doesn't matter if it's smooth or a little bit rough, because that's what you do. You circumambulate, go all the way around. So I always think of going through the Bhagavatam like circumambulating Govardhan. And some places you may come to that you don't have as much interest yet, because you haven't discovered the context or something hasn't sparked for you, but you still keep going because it's like parikram. You just keep walking one step after another, dutifully through. And then so many times when you do that, then there's such a reward that comes from that. Something will connect to that part that you hadn't thought of before. And the Bhagavatam is like, it's also like churning. When you churn milk and it turns into butter, or you churn the milk ocean and great entities come out from it. So that's the way I think about it. As once you make up your mind, you're going to do the parikrama, you're going to finish it. Once you make up your mind, you're going to finish the Bhagavatam. Doesn't matter what section it is, do your pages and keep going through.
And just to add a couple of things on this, difficult sections of the Bhagavatam, two things I think I'd like to add is, one is that Srila Prabhupada's purports are always there. And so even in the midst of like a very, very technical section, Srila Prabhupada's purport will always bring out a very, very pertinent point that affects you and touches you in the here and now. So Prabhupada's purports are always like you have to stay tuned because something's going to happen, even in the most technical of sections. So that's one thing. And the other thing that helps me when I read technical sections, for example, now we're reading in the Bhagavatam in the morning all about the material elements and about pradhan and the mahatattva, and sometimes it gets very technical. What helps me is I try to think, what is the bottom line here? The bottom line is that the universe is amazingly vast and I'm small. My problems are small. My mind is small. My anxiety it's like when I was a kid, I always loved going to the ocean. I couldn't swim. Still can't swim. But I just like to sit in front of the ocean and just look at the ocean. Because it was almost like just looking at the whole ocean, just put your whole life into context, like right there. And I would just stare at the ocean for hours, and it just was very, very calming. It was very, very peaceful, because there was just a sense of perspective that brought. And I find some sections of the Bhagavatam are like that. You don't need to try to analyze them too much. You just need to understand what's the bottom line here. This universe is vast. These time scales are cosmic. And my life is small, my problems are small, and everything that I make so big is actually really, really tiny in the context of reality. And therefore, those sections also become very, very inspiring because they just give you perspective. And that's how I try to register those parts of the Bhagavatam. Is that okay?
Hare Krishna. I just want to say something which will end up with question toward Vaisesika Prabhu. And not all people are equally ambitious regarding Bhagavatam. Not everybody really wants to read the whole Bhagavatam. Many people are busy with other things and they just cannot, they never set their mind that I want to read this book, really the whole book, and learn it and dive deeply into it. But still, Bhagavatam is very approachable. And in our struggle for existence, often we need specific guidance or specific empowerment. And there are many stories in Bhagavatam which Bhagavatam itself, it says that if you read this story carefully with undivided attention, and certain benefits are listed. And many of these stories they are short parts of Bhagavatam, and many of these stories, they carry blessing in them, embedded. And this is very approachable way to read Bhagavatam. When you are at a certain stage of your struggle for existence, and you have some questions, doubts, bewilderment, and whatever you struggle with, you read certain story of Bhagavatam, which is very empowering and enlightening and inspiring, and you get certain blessings. In many stories, they are, when you read this story, and then and it's so specific and so usable, so practical, the spiritual solutions of our material problems. So my question toward Vaisesika Prabhu is, can you please further say something on this?
Yeah, recently I was looking at the Bhagavatam, identifying attitudes based on your shirt that says attitude is everything. And Prabhupada says that too in the preface to the Upadeshamrita, that advancement in devotional service is dependent on the attitude of the follower. I was just thinking how important attitudes are and that you can change them also. So I was trying to identify the different attitudes of various important figures in the Srimad Bhagavatam. My mother used to tell me when I was a kid, she said, never underestimate the power of all show them. Like, someone tells you can't do it, then the rest of your life's like, I'm going to show you I can do it. Dhruva Maharaj, the attitude is like, all right, that's it. I'm going for it. I don't care. Nobody's going to stop me. Even Narada comes and says, yeah, maybe go back. Try to make amends. Like, no, I'm going. And then there's Devahuti. I can relate to Devahuti in that she says, I'm sick and tired of this. Who's sick and tired of their minds? Everyone. We don't even know what's making us sick and tired, but Devahuti comes out and says it, that I've had enough. I'm not doing this anymore. I don't know how to stop exactly, but I'm going to find out. And the way I've looked at Bhagavatam, the way I've felt by reading Bhagavatam, is it's medicinal. And I mentioned that earlier. It's mentioned in various other places how it's a medicine. It cures us. And these stories, nested stories, stories within stories, they unknot the kinds of psychological conditions that we can develop in this world that hold us back from developing our full potential. And Bhagavatam knows us so well. Oftentimes when I'm reading any of these sections, I go, how did you know I was thinking like that? And how did you... Bhagavatam, when we become so impressed by reading the Bhagavatam, because Bhagavatam knows what we've been through. Bhagavatam knows what we're thinking right now and how we're struggling in various ways, and it unpacks those. So you can look at it like that and learn to take shelter of various parts of Bhagavatam at various times. And Prabhupada once said about reading Bhagavatam or any of his books, he said you can open anywhere. Like at breakfast this morning, we just heard a little bit from Prabhupada's books. It was random. You were reading to us, and you just opened anywhere. And just 4 verses from anywhere, we found, wow, I think my whole day just changed, maybe my life, just hearing a few words, a few verses from the Bhagavatam. So you can approach it from any direction and appreciate the Bhagavatam. The main thing is to stay in contact and serve the Bhagavatam by listening and give it a chance. Let the medicine go in. In the beginning, you might not notice a difference when the doctor gives you the medicine. After 4 days, you think, this doesn't work. I have a friend, whenever he gets sick, he goes to the doctor and says, give me antibiotics. Like, those don't work except for bacterial infections. And it's like, I don't care. And then he'll take it for 1 day and he'll go back and say, you gave me the wrong stuff. Give me something else. And if we're like that with the Bhagavatam, then it may take us longer. But if we accept that it's medicine and we say, let me take it. And if you want to look at different stories, each one of them addresses a very deep kind of entanglement I have psychologically in this world. Om Tat Sat.
Yeah, can we do a quick fire before we end? That means 1 word or 1 sentence.
Okay, we're going to do it back and forth?
No, this way. It's going this way.
All right.
Favorite Krishna pastime?
Putana.
Favorite sage?
Narada. No, I want to change that to, I like Dadichi.
Okay, yeah.
Because they go and ask him for a little donation. What do you want? your bones. And he goes, oh, all right. I like that.
Favorite incarnation?
Kapila.
Favorite verse?
Shrinvatam svakata Krishna punya shravana kirtana ridyantaksta hibadrani vidunoti surit. You realize how hard this is, right? Because I like them all. I'm just playing along. Go ahead.
Favorite canto?
Oh boy. It's so hard to choose. Okay, first canto. But really, honestly, every one of them, anyway, first canto.
Favorite Sanskrit word?
Suhrit, the best friend in the heart. Krishna is always there to help us, never leaves us.
And favorite subject or topic or of the Bhagavatam?
I'd like to hear about the pastime in the 10th canto when Krishna goes to Kurukshetra. And then everybody goes with him, and it's the first time that the devotees from Vrindavan see him after so long, because it relates to the Ratha Yatra pastime. I just love how it is interconnected with Jagannath Puri and Vrindavan and Navadvip and Lord Chaitanya. It all converges there.
And I guess the final question, which will lead on to just the final thing we want to talk about, which is we're really here talking not just about the world of the Bhagavatam, but how the Bhagavatam is also affecting the world out there. And so my last question to you will be one message from the Bhagavatam that if you could broadcast on social media and would go viral, what message would that be?
I like reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all, just as is explained in the Bhagavatam.
Wonderful.
And favorite Swami, Keshava Maharaj.
And so we're kind of coming a bit to the end, but just to kind of follow on from this theme and at least wrap up this part of the program. Obviously, we're on this mission, this campaign, this real push to share the Bhagavatam far and wide. And you've really been the inspiration, the driver, the visionary behind it. Can you just tell us a little bit about why and how you see this moving forward and what all of us here in the room can do to be part of that excitement and adventure?
It is exciting and adventurous to distribute the Srimad Bhagavatam. In general, the material world is boring. It's the same thing over and over again. But when you introduce Bhagavatam, there's nothing ordinary about it. It comes from the spiritual world. What's more, one could argue, and Srila Prabhupada does in the Bhagavatam, that it's the only intervention that will actually work in the material world. As you said in the beginning, we have to raise the conversation to a level that's transcendental. And Prabhupada himself didn't come to America until he had the Bhagavatam in hand. Painstakingly, he carried over the Bhagavatam. What to speak of, he wrote it himself, made sure that he had the volumes. Writing a book is like building a house. It's one of the most difficult things to do. What to speak if you're alone and you don't have money. He was so determined to bring the Bhagavatam. So for those who have a sense for the purpose of life, and we feel sad that people don't have it, distributing Bhagavatam is a joyous experience. And it's something that we can see ourselves transforms people when they get it. Just the very act of taking a Bhagavatam into one's house is transformative, because sociologists say people keep things in their house because it reflects their values. So when people take a Bhagavatam in their house, they really have to think about it, because once you set up a set like this somewhere, anywhere in your house, and people walk in, it's like, hey, what are you into? It's like, all right, I'm a Hare Krishna. So what's more, once it's there, it's a transcendental entity in one's home. And we see so many times when the Bhagavatam moves in, then people's bad habits move out, and that their lives transform. We see it before our very eyes. And for those who distribute Bhagavatams to others, we get to appreciate vicariously through new people who are taking it how transformative it is, because we see it in their lives, and then we recognize that, oh yeah, this works, and we want to take it more and more. The combination of reading it and also distributing it is invaluable. You get both things. There's rice, which is a good food. Yes or no? Yes or yes. And there's dal, which is a good food, right? Say yes. Say yes. But when you put the two together, you get a superfood. That's according to Jamuna's cookbook. 42% more nutrition when rice and dal are together. So when you read the Bhagavatam and you distribute the Bhagavatam, you have a kind of super sadhana, and you can feel it yourself in your life. So we started several years ago thinking of ways to expand the distribution of Bhagavatam. In fact, devotees have been thinking about it for years, how to present. Some even went and got trained by Encyclopedia Britannica, if anybody's old enough to know what that is. They were big sets of, anyway. And we came across the Bhadra Purnima theme in the Bhagavatam itself, which is over here, that says when you give away the set of Bhagavatams for Bhadra Purnima, full moon in the month of Bhadra, you go back to Godhead. Bhagavatam is offering benediction for those who are doing this. So the first couple of years, we were only able to do about 7,000 worldwide. And a few participants. India got into it. London got into it. Our team out in California. But then when the pandemic started, well, before it started, we made a vow that we would do 10,000 Bhagavatam sets in 1 year. That was in Tirupati at a GBC meeting. And I made a public statement that we're going to do 10,000 in 2020. That was 2019. Anything you can remember that happened in 2020 come to mind? You don't want to remember? Pandemic started. And a lot of people said, okay, well, it's not going to happen this year. But we just kept pushing it. And then it went from 7,000 to over 20,000 in 1 year. But then, yeah, that happened. And then we thought it was a fluke. So we tried again the next year, and then we were able to go to another huge increase, up to 30,000. Our goal now is to get a baseline of distributing at least 100,008 sets of Bhagavatams in 1 year. That's a decent number, don't you think? It's a good place to start our inundation of the world with the Srimad Bhagavatam at 100,008. So we're going all over the world and talking about the Bhagavatam and encouraging devotees to read it and also to join in with all devotees all over the world to make it available to other people. The world's open for business right now, and the main business is distribution of Srimad Bhagavatam. That's what Prabhupada came for. Read about it in his notes, in his poems that he wrote on the Jaladuta. It was all about distributing the Bhagavatam. So we can be part of that legacy. And you can't have any more fun than joining the mainstream, or even around the edges. You'll get swept away. It's so invigorating to distribute Srimad Bhagavatam. Thank you for asking.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. Yes. Think a little louder than that. Haribo. Wonderful. It's so wonderful here to be this evening with you, who inspired this initiative, but also to hear from you about your relationship with the Srimad Bhagavatam, and it makes it all so much more significant and so much more inspiring. And are you all inspired to go deeper in your relationship with the Bhagavatam? Yes, we are. And hopefully we can connect many, many more individuals. The campaign continues until September 17th, and we'll be hearing a little bit more about that. But we'll conclude this part of the program and offer another round of applause to His Grace Vaisesika Prabhu.